Hello everyone, it's your favorite West Virginia in space here, and the beta for Critical Role's new RPG Daggerheart has now been out for a few days now, and a lot of people have been talking about, of course, as Critical Role does something that's obviously quite important in the RPG world for a lot of people. And honestly, I wanted to get my two thoughts on it, mostly because I'm kind of worried of how polarized some things in the RPG community have become now, that this kind of thing won't get a fair shake or review. People have always kind of sorted into their camps of whether they want to like it or hate it, and I kind of want to give my thoughts on it that I hope I don't want to say more objective, but more balanced, that at least I wasn't set out to hate or like this game right from the start, if that makes sense. A few things I do want to cover right away, however, is that one, I'm not going to go into specific, like, oh, this ability at level 3 for this domain is too powerful, or such and such. I'm not going to go into specifics of balancing, just because, let's say it's a beta, a lot's going to change, so I feel that's kind of unfair and probably counterproductive for what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to cover the big stuff. 2, this beta is very, very big. Like, I mean this in all sincerity, this is enough here that you could easily play this RPG for dozens of campaigns and you'd be just fine. Like, this is not a small scrap of a thing. This is in many ways a full RPG that just needs some polishing, which I say is a full compliment. I am going to say that I'm going to be willing to be a bit more harsh with it, just because I know this is not just like a few scrabbles of note paper, but much closer to a finished product. And the third thing I'm going to kind of go into with this is that I must say this video is going to be a little bit on the negative side, as I do have more complaints I want to talk about, but there's a lot to like about this RPG in a lot of ways. The artwork's nice, some of the design ideas are kind of cool, and we'll just kind of get with them when I said. But like I said, though, I'm going to be a bit more negative in this video. Just remember, I don't hate everything about this. This is just me more criticizing things that stood out to me in a lot of ways, if that makes sense. Anyway, let's get into it. Something I want to say right off the gate is that I do find it kind of weird that there's both agility and finesse in this game. Like, I understand they wanted to keep the 6-stat system but not mimic D&D perfectly, but it does feel so weird having these two split up in a way that feels very awkward. I'm honestly not sure what you do to fix this in this case. I mean, I'd probably just re-merge them back into one stat and then add a sixth one to fill the slot, but, that's just what I would do. But another thing I want to get into, though, more importantly here, is how the dice work in this game. You all know it's a 2d12 system. One's your hope dice, one your fear die. You want to reach a certain total, and if your hope die is good, you get a hope point. If your fear die is higher, even if you succeed, there's negative consequences. It's a relatively basic system, and not necessarily a bad one. In fact, I like some ideas about it. Heck, someone independently came up with the different idea for another RPG I wanted to make, although it wasn't quite the same. But so the point is, I'm not necessarily opposed to this. I understand that a lot of people like mixed success roles in RPGs. I generally don't. I feel like kind of a crutch in all ways, but I do fully admit that is fully just my personal taste on the matter and cannot be taken as an objective standpoint. Something I do consider a bit more worrying, though, is how hard the game forces the whole idea of fail forwards. And I especially just don't really like that in RPGs or anything really, just because I think it disincentivizes the players from actually trying to do things cleverly. Because if the players realize that they can just always make some kind of decision, it will eventually crawl them over to where they want to go, regardless of what they do. Granted, this will be consequences to it, but I just feel it's a bad mentality to set forth to your players. Another thing I do want to discuss, and this isn't a criticism, it's more of a statement, is your hope points and especially your stress levels is very important in this game. The stress might seem like it's a separate mechanic from your HP. It is not. It's heavily linked in there based on how damage works in the game. Basically, if the attack roll the enemy gave you was not high enough to do HP directly, it will cause stress to you instead. Stress is like a super resource in this game just because of how many abilities draw on it and need you to have stress to burn. And the thing is, if you have to take stress and you have no more stress to burn, you take HP. And you don't have a lot, and granted, you don't only 1 HP, right? But you don't have a lot of HP points in this game to lose. This isn't like we have like 100 points, and that's just a small thing to do. Also, if you want an ability, or try to use an ability that requires you to spend stress, and you don't have stress points, you can't just take HP to make up the difference. You just can't use that power, which is a big deal because a lot of powers in this game require you to take stress or something like that in order to use, which it's not necessarily a flaw, it's just something to watch out for, because you can very quickly lose all your stress points and lock out half your abilities. And once again, given how closely tied stress is to health in this game, all abilities that require you to use stress are effectively casting from health, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying I don't think the game stresses how important stress points can be in this game, and failing to have them or burning them, how important it can be. It's not necessarily criticism, but you have to look out for that. The next part of this will be primarily focused around like characters, character creation, that kind of thing. One of the first things I do want to say is that they have ancestries in the game, but I'm going to keep calling them races for most of it because, well, I play a lot of fantasy RPGs. That's generally what it's called, and no one can stop me from doing it. But to go over it, the game has 18 right now, which is a truly impressive amount. I do feel that some of them feel a bit superfluous, as they don't really feel like they fit or have an honest place to exist except to pad out things. Like the frog people, they kind of work, but like the fungal people and the primates just feel like they're tacked on to either hit some kind of number count or to say they have things that something else doesn't have. So they feel kind of superfluous. The abilities, most of them only have one, if you're really lucky, 2 abilities. Like I said, I won't go into the balancing of them, but I do kind of feel like they feel a bit, I don't know, I feel like each race could have had more to it. Maybe if you cut down the number of them in half and then gave double the abilities to like each one, I feel like that would make each one feel a bit more meaningful, but that's just me. Next are the classes, and most of the classes are kind of what you would expect from like a fantasy RPG, you know, your warriors, your sorcerers, your wizards, your rogues, that kind of thing. Something to look out for, though, is that there is no cleric and paladin, and they're both loosely replaced by the guardian in the seraphim class, which is really more just like the paladin split in half. And I'm gonna be honest, I don't necessarily mind the idea of those 2 classes. The guardian feels way too much like it should be just a part of the warrior, though, and the seraphim. But honestly, together, it feels like the guardian and seraphim just feel like 2 halves of the paladin whole. And as a paladin main, it does feel kind of sad to see my baby so obviously cut up like that. But the thing is, your class doesn't matter as much in this game as you think. It does matter somewhat. It divides like your hit points, but the biggest thing it does is give you domains, which domains you have. Now, something worth noting is that each class gives you 2 domains. If you're a Vampire the Masquerade fan, think of each class as giving you like certain disciplines you can use. And the important detail is, there's always, you get 2 domains, and each domain is shared by 2 classes each. Now, overall, the domains are Arcane, Blade, Bone, Codex, Grace, Midnight, Sage, Splendor, and Valor. Which, honestly, not the worst domains. Like I said, I'm not going into specific card effects, but they're okay. I do feel in some ways that maybe like Vampire the Masquerade, if classes had access to 3 domains, it would help them feel a little bit more like they had more going on. But that's just kind of my opinion, and that could mess with the balancing, so I understand that. Now, there is another thing connected to the domain cards that I want to talk about. We'll kind of get its own section, as I feel it's a very big part of the game going on here. The last part is kind of your origin, where like your character come from, and they're all like highborn, lowborn, seaborn. All one of them ends with born, and that just kind of hurts my head. By the way, like that, I don't like that. It feels weird. Okay, can we give them more original names? Like highborn can stay, but like seaborn, that just sounds kind of weird. Overall, they're okay. They give you some kind of one-stop ability, which honestly, as just a small thing, some of the abilities are okay, but some of them, once again, I don't want to get too much into balancing, but I feel in a lot of cases it would just be better if where your different origins just gave you a plus to your one particular stat, because right now as it is in the game, you only get like 2 +1s to a stat, 1 + 2, 2 zeros, and 1 -1, and that's for everything. Like that just leaves, in my opinion, the characters feeling very artificial. It's part of the reason why I always use point buy in D&D or rolling for stats and not like the standard array. It makes characters come off a bit too factory setting, if you get me. I just feel like if like your ancestry or your where you were born actually gave like 1 or 2 stat buffs or even decreases or something, just to make the characters, to make it feel like it matters a bit more in a way I think would be better. Ultimately, though, the character creation is okay. It's very kind of, if you play D&D or other RPGs like it, you kind of get it. Some of the changes feel a bit weird, but ultimately nothing I couldn't get behind in the right circumstances. There is one, however, big, massive problem in the RPG that I really think is going to bring it down. That being the cards. I honestly do believe the cards in Daggerheart could be its biggest downfall, but it comes in a two-phase process, kind of. The first one goes back to character creation, actually. You see, at character creation, you have a few cards that make up your character in a lot of ways. You know, your ancestry, where you were born, your class, and your subclass card, and all that jazz. But you also have your domain cards, which are drawn from the two decks of domains you can draw from. At character creation, you start with 2 cards, and it's worth mentioning that domain cards are separate from the other cards we previously mentioned, for reasons we will get into very soon. But at character creation, like I said, you start with 2 domain cards, and every time you level up, you add a new to your deck. Until you get to 5th level, or past 5th level. Because here's the thing, right? Is that in the game, your domain cards, like I said, you can only have 5 domain cards at all. Like, that is your maximum. Anytime after that, you have to replace a previously known domain card with another one you have to pick from. Like, now granted, you gain new, more powerful abilities, but like, I don't like this, especially because it feels very limiting that your character has this artificial amount they can use at any given point, especially because it leads to me thinking these characters must be stupid because they forget seeming abilities they use from the start. And this isn't a game where you start out with very low powered abilities where it's like, oh, why would I remember like Firebolt when I have Fire Tornado? But like I believe like one of the second level abilities is invisibility. Now, once again, I don't want to go too much into like the balancing of this, but you don't start out with like no power and then you just obviously replace these powers. It's just, instead, it comes off I know why they did it, logically. They wanted to keep the complexity low so people could easily remember all their powers. But they openly admit they want this game to be for longer play. They want you to play for long campaigns that could last a year. And there's only 10 levels to the game. So if we went to do some rough calculations, I just don't understand, is it really absurd to believe that players couldn't remember more than 5 domain abilities at once? If we count the other 3 cards you have, or 3 or 4 cards, you would only average to about 9 or 10 cards you'd have to remember at any point at the maximum they have right now. And I don't see why people can't remember more if you're only learning new powers relatively rarely. Especially because one of the things you can do in a long rest is switch out which domain cards you have effectively can use. Which also leads to other questions like, how are these characters constantly forgetting powers and abilities they have? It kind of made sense in D&D for like clerics and paladins who could switch out things given how their powers worked. But like, why is a fighter forgetting combat tactics they knew and continue to use? It's a silly mechanism. And the fact you can switch them out shows that the game developers expect you to know enough about each power in this game to know when to pull it out and when to use it, at least on a prepping stage. Which is a lot because each domain, since you have 2 domains, and right now there's 2 cards in each level for each domain, that means for every level you have access to, you're adding 4 new cards you have to at least have a vague understanding of how they work. That's a lot more than just asking you to remember a handful of abilities and every couple of sessions add a new one to your deck. I feel it's very weird. But also, this comes back to another problem, especially with the cards, but especially with domains even more so, is how, because they're so focused on the cards and you share domains with other players, what happens if you both have, say, the Midnight domain and you both want the same power? Well, the game kind of goes around it. You could maybe do it or come with some homebrew way, but the idea is you don't. Players can't share powers. They can't both have the same ability, which is so bizarre to me because this game that is supposedly so focused around customization and playing the character you want it has such an arbitrary limitation. And that comes down to another whole problem with the cards themselves. This game is so built around the card gimmick that I have to wonder how well it works without it. Because you come down with 2 problems. If people ignore the card aspects, or the card aspects can be ignored, then you get a situation where the cards are just being boxed in with the game to cost more money, when it would just be better if you just wrote it down on a character sheet or a PDF and called it a day. But if you do force players to use the card system, then you run in situations like, well, can we both play humans if we only have 1 human card? Can we both have this one ability we want to use, but with only 1 card for it? This will massively hurt the game, I think, and I think the cards would at best be a fun extra that could be a supplement, like how D&D used to do those spell card things, rather than a core aspect to the game like they want it to be. I understand what Critical Role is trying to do here. They're trying to give they're trying to simplify it. It's like, oh, you just have to read what's on your card. It's easy. And I admire the effort, but I do truly believe that in the nature of trying to do this, they're only going to hurt the game. The arbitrary card limit, the forcing players not to have the same ability, and stuff like this will ultimately be one of the game's biggest downfalls. And I'm not sure what they can do to fix it beyond either making the cards totally accessory or, I don't know, honestly. I don't really know. Ultimately, I don't think Daggerheart is necessarily the worst game to ever exist. I've reviewed worse games. Trust me. But ultimately, I do think it has some flaws. I think it has some potential. I think if they could work around the problems, I think they really could have something. Do I think they will? I don't think they will. I think they're very set in stone of what they want to do. They want to make the game like they want to make it. So I don't think they'll really fix these flaws. I think they'll try to fix balancing with certain cards if they exist, but I don't think they'll fix the core problems with the system. Granted, I don't think it's as bad as what I heard the Obscura game was. That looked way more of a hot mess. I think this one, Daggerheart, could be fun. I think you could honestly run some fun games with it. I just feel it's very limited. It's definitely no D&D killer. Although, honestly, trying to be a D&D killer is a great way to just not be a D&D killer. I don't think you'll ever be a D&D killer, and trying to market this game as a D&D killer will not work. Pathfinder tried to market itself somewhat as, well, actually Pathfinder really didn't. Exalted definitely tried to manage itself as a D&D killer, and D&D is still around. So don't think of this as your replacement to D&D, because that's just not what it's going to be. And honestly, if you just want to play a game to be a killer of D&D, I don't think that's a good thing. But that's a slight tangent, and I want to hear your thoughts. What do you think about Daggerheart? It's a free beta, so you can read it yourself. I highly recommend you do. Have you play tested it? What do you think of it? I want to hear your thoughts and opinions. Like, comment, dislike, all that jazz. I want to talk to you down below, and I'll see you all next time. Yeah. Hey, why don't you hit that sub button? You're gonna become a subscriber. Get to see my content quicker. Wouldn't that be nice? I bet so.